Welcome to Life on Life's Terms. This is your host, Chelsey, and today I'm doing a solo show. I'm going to be talking to you guys about my experience this month and what it has been like overall doing this whole environmental issues topic and talking about that forbidden climate change issue. And, I was really thinking about it. And if I go back to when I was a kid, the things that we learned automatically back in elementary school, things that just seemed to be the norm, was learning how to recycle and reuse. Like, you remember learning about binning. There was the section for your juice boxes. Then there was your plastic water bottles. And then there was cans. This is what you were taught. Well, this is what I was taught. And we were told that this was the way to, quote, save the planet. Like, this was one of the key solutions to avoiding hurting our planet Earth. And we were told that this is the way to avoid having waste where there shouldn't be waste, not having non-biodegradable crap all over the place, right? This will keep Earth pretty. This is what you do. Taught us at a young age. And it was instilled in my brain personally. I remember that they took us on a field trip. We went to the dump and they showed us, very, very dramatically showed us all the garbage, all the plastic, what would happen if we were not to follow suit, if we were not to use this binning method. And we got to go into the recycle section where everything was supposed to be sorted. But, oh no, people weren't doing it properly. So they had people in there, which I believe they still do now, separating all the garbage and the recyclables as they come down the conveyor belt. And I remember, this was 20 years ago that I went on this field trip. And I remember it very clearly because it obviously impacted me. I felt like, holy crap, I better fucking recycle and reuse. I better not be throwing my cardboard in the garbage. I better not be putting my cans in with the paper. And then here I am as an adult, and I find out just this month, I find out that plastic, recycling it actually costs us more than it does to create it. Here I am thinking recycle, refine, that's what we have to do. Make sure I am following what I was taught at a young age, making sure that I'm going to instill this ideology into my daughter's mind as well. But yet it's costing our economy more financially to reuse and recycle. Is it worth it to be even passing on these ideas to my daughter if that's the case? And is it worth it me doing the time and effort it takes to separate all my crap? I mean, don't get me wrong, I do like taking my bottles in for a refund. But in the long run, it's almost like we were just lied to as children. And this lie is still going on. How many of you listeners out there were not aware of this fact that it costs more to recycle than it does to create plastic? Take any shopping mall now, any restaurant, they have 3 different sections. They have your waste bin, they have your plastic bin, and then they have your cardboard and paper. And pretty much the only thing that I got out of my field trip back to the dump back in the day was I learned how to compost. I learned that composting is a good thing. And that obviously is not bullshit. My grandma used to compost all the time. Actually, we used to get in trouble as kids if we threw a banana peel in the garbage can. Look out. There was a specific compost bin outside, and that was what she used. And we helped her use when we helped her garden. And to her, that was the only way. That was the best way. And that's something that has stuck with me as well. Unfortunately, I don't have the same green thumb that she had, but at least I know I can feel comfortable passing that lesson along to my daughter and know that that's not some bullshit lie that the government has told us to do. Instead, that's information coming from experience and coming from my grandmother. Honestly, a part of me kind of looks forward to putting Elizabeth through the fun of it by her having to experience that awful smell of compost. I remember we used to rock, paper, scissors as grandchildren between who had to go open it to throw in our banana peels because it was so god awful, that smell. But at the same time, that was the good stuff. Like, that had to go in the soil if you wanted to eat strawberries that were worth eating. And if we wanted grandma to make those homemade pies, then we had to do the rough part and we had to use that compost, or it just wouldn't be the same. But at least the aftermath was being able to smell that fresh strawberry rhubarb pie that if we were well behaved enough, we would get a slice of after dinner. I mean, there was those the shitty smell, the flies buzzing around outside that compost bin, but inside there was the ultimate prize. And we were thankful in the end that we got to be a part of it. And I mean, I love the way that my grandma kind of had that old school hippie-dippy version of providing for herself and providing for her children and grandchildren from her big garden instead of having to get everything from a grocery store. And it just goes to show, like, her way was never a lie. I mean, she was canning and jarring fruits and vegetables, and she was making jam. And there you go. You want to talk about reusing. She's reusing jars after she has made a batch of pickled carrots and run out, and now it's time to make jam. That was real reusing without costing the economy more money. Whereas nowadays you throw out your water bottles into that recycle bin and it's actually costing us money. Besides, like I said, that small return you got when you go to the bottle depot. That's the only part that's not costing you money. And I was bad for this. You know how many times I've been gifted a steel water bottle? I got one on Mother's Day. And it said Mom in Every Day or something like that. I said I loved it. It's my favorite one. I have 4 more in the cupboard that I forget to use. You know what I'm drinking out of today? A plastic water bottle. You know where I probably am going to put it? In my recycle bin. But that's where I've noticed almost I'm being a hypocrite. I'm contradicting myself. Do I even want to teach my daughter to be doing this? Or should I not be using these plastic water bottles at all? I don't think I should. I think I should be sticking to the metal ones that I have at home. And I mean, how often do those get thrown out? Never. Lost sometimes, but never thrown out. And I don't have to go to a grocery store to pick them up at the end of every week. I just constantly have one that I'm reusing for free. And I mean, of course, there are probably some listeners thinking right now, but what about the contaminants that are in those metal water bottles or metal coffee mugs? Well, don't use the metal ones then. What about glass ones? I got a couple of those hanging out in my cupboard too that I could probably switch to. In the end, I am talking about how expensive it is to recycle these water bottles. Like, people in my circle of friends and family were not aware of this fact either. They were just, their biggest concern was what they heard going on all over the world. And they were on the same page as me that what we need to do, and I mean we as in my family members, is just make sure that our plastic is going into a recycle bin, because them, like myself, they were taught this when they were growing up. So here we all are being fed what I believe to be is just lies. We are told these crazy things about the ocean and how we're destroying it with plastic. And don't get me wrong, I've seen the plastic that is in the ocean. But another thing that I found out this month is that Canada's impact on all this plastic in the ocean is not even 1%. Yet here we are being told that if we don't reuse and recycle, then look out, look what you are causing, look what damage you are creating. But here in my city, in Edmonton, I'm pretty sure that cannot compare to what is happening around the world. And I know for a fact that my grandmother's way of reusing and recycling was not a lie, and that was a way that was superior. In my opinion, it's the way that things should still be done. And I mean, everything that I learned in school, I was fed this information that made me feel like it was my job to protect the planet. And oh, geez, I was a terrible person if I were to forget to throw something in the proper bin. Like, how dare I throw that plastic or that cardboard in with the rest of the waste? And I was not pulling my weight, or I'm not doing my part to save planet Earth, air quotes, and that there was this way things should be done. And then here again, I'm saying I find out that that's just costing more money. And what good is that really doing us? And why are we still practicing this in schools? Why do we have bins set up this way in restaurants and in shopping malls? Why is everybody under the impression that this is the way to do things and this is what is going to make a huge global impact, is what it feels like people are implying, when really Canada's impact is so small. Like I said, 1%. And then you have places like China and India where it is much more massive. And yet they have a free pass until 2030 before they are expected to make any massive changes, which I just feel like that's outrageous. I don't understand. If they are such huge contributors to this problem, why do they get another 10 years, 11 years free pass? How is that benefiting anyone? So like, these are the thoughts, and this is the information that has been rolling around in my head this month while I'm doing my research. And when I started all of this, I thought, well, everybody must be like me. Everybody must have been taught this stuff as a child. And of course, everybody must be on board with saving Earth and doing what we're supposed to. I'm assuming everybody recycles. Like, this was my thought process, right? And then I had conversations with friends and family, and they all seemed to be on the same boat as I was. I mean, occasionally we would joke about how, we threw a plastic bag into the garbage. Like, that's a huge no-no. And we would talk about how we were trying to use cloth bags, reusable bags for grocery shopping, stuff as simple as that. And I mean, you go and look at things like TED Talks, and there's hundreds of videos to watch. So I assume that this is going to be a topic such like climate change and environmental issues is going to be something that everybody is willing to throw their opinion at, because come on now, everybody is opinionated. Everybody wants to share their 2 cents. And then you just go on YouTube, and there's thousands of conversations about environmental issues. You go on the website, and there's hundreds and thousands, probably millions of different websites, different articles that you can look at, and that you can find information, whether it's honest, whether it's misleading, or whether it's something you believe or an opposing point of view. It's there. There's information everywhere. So I assumed this would be a hot topic this month, one that everybody would want to partake in. And I mean, personally, it's a topic I was passionate about just due to the fact that I'm a mother. And because I already had these beliefs, and I had these beliefs that I wanted to pass down to my daughter. So I thought that this would be a great way to get information from other people, to hear other people's opinions, and a great way to tackle this topic so that I'm well informed and that I can pass information on to my daughter. I did not expect this month to be the way it was. I definitely thought it would be easy peasy. And from what's been going on, it hasn't quite been so. And so here I am wondering whether or not I pass my beliefs and everything I was taught as a child on to my daughter. But here in media, like my generation, is being blamed for not doing their part, and how climate change and pollution and waste where it shouldn't be is our fault. So now, of course, it's the next generation's responsibility to, quote, save the earth. And all that pressure is being put on kids, but really, who is giving them this information? Where are they finding this information? Who is putting this pressure on them? Are they being taught the way I was taught? Like, I mean, for fuck's sakes, you have kids who are walking out of school protesting climate change. How is that happening? Who's planting this seed in their head? And who's allowing them to do this? I I have a feeling that they would probably have just as much misinformation as the next person out there, because in my opinion, from everything that I have gathered this month, it is not a clear topic. So how can these kids be protesting something that they probably know minimally about? They have probably been shared biased viewpoints from other people and feel proud and excited to be fighting for a cause and hoping to make a difference, because everybody wants that feeling. So as a kid in school, I would have loved to be the person doing that. Like, oh, I was told to recycle. Look at me. So when I'm looking into this information, I am absolutely 100% overwhelmed, probably the very first day that I started to do research. And I can only imagine that any kid out there who has gotten information probably took their tiny first bit that they found, took that with them to a protest, and that was that. Because I know there is a few times where I would have to close my computer and walk away, because I was like, holy crap. It was like one topic led to another, to another, to another. One opinion was completely contrasted to another, and I would feel myself so stuck as to where I actually felt. I would think that I had a solid belief in my head until I read 3 more articles that completely were on the opposite end of the spectrum. And then I would be doubting myself. I'd be thinking about what I was taught as a kid compared to what I hear on the media now, or compared to different websites that I would come across. And there was just so much information, and I didn't know where to start or end, or how to compile it all together to form an honest opinion, because that opinion seemed to always be changing. And that's what, for me, when it came to these episodes, made it so difficult to pick topics specifically, because there's so many out there. Do I talk about the oceans? Do I talk about fossil fuels burning? Do I talk about, well, obviously we're talking about recycling and reusing right now, but do I talk about capturing carbon? Do I reach out to geologists, or do I reach out to meteorologists? Like, there's so many different environmental issues. There's so many rabbit holes to go down that it makes it almost feel like I'm running around in a maze trying to find the end, or that light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I'm busy trying to form an opinion, but I can't, because I can't get what I feel like is a proper understanding of this, quote, climate change issue. And therefore I'm stuck in the middle, because what I've noticed with this topic, it has extreme polar opposite opinions to it. And here I am, a moderate in the middle, because how am I supposed to pick a side when I can't seem to find a solid ground, a solid base to build from? And I know that I'm not the only person who feels this way. Like I said, I've discussed this with family members and friends, and the conclusion I've come to is that we're just moderates, and it's almost easier just staying in the middle until maybe, just maybe, we will get lucky and these polar opposite viewpoints can come to us that are formed in a non-biased way. Because it's the other big thing that I noticed this month is there's so many biased opinions and biased viewpoints out there that you can't even take half these people seriously. For example, the one TED Talks I talked about with Katherine Hayhoe, very biased. She was 100%, in her opinion, right, because she was a climate scientist. It was her way or no way. She knew what she was talking about. And I talk about the different biased worldviews in a blog that I wrote. And that was when I think I really had the realization that it's just easier being in the middle and not picking one of these sides. If I could relate to anyone, if I felt comfortable agreeing with anyone out of every TED Talks and podcast and article I researched and read and listened to, it would probably have to be with Howard Bloom in his podcast episode with Joe Rogan about environmental issues and climate change. He, to me, he had the least biased opinion. He still strongly believes that humans must use technology in order to resolve or get a hands-on control of this climate change that is going on. So all of this information that's out there, 100% the first thought that came to my mind when I was trying to do research was that statement that Bob Lazar made, where he's pretty much just saying good luck to anybody who wants to find information on the internet, because there's so much misinformation out there. And like I said, there's so many opinions, and I was just flat out confused between being overwhelmed and finding biased opinions. I even caught myself being biased and using my emotions to guide my thought, my emotions as a mother to guide my thought process. And that was when I realized I had to put those feelings aside. I really had to be open-minded and not narrow-minded, and no contempt prior to investigation. So I thought that a great way to not so much solve that, but to ease the whole research process and the whole process of absorbing information was to hear from multiple people and get multiple opinions. And I wanted to do that through having guests on the show. And I was following new people on social media, like on Twitter and on Facebook. I was reaching out to people on all platforms, including Instagram. And I really wanted to reach out to a wide variety. So there was storm chasers and geologists, meteorologists, environmentalists. I even searched high and low for somebody who is willing to talk about different conspiracy theories. I wanted to have the most open-minded opinion possible, and I wanted to bring that to all you listeners. So here I am this month. I was on this mission, and I'm reaching out to all these different people, and I'm excited, and I'm confident that this is going to be great, because we are going to hear about people who have strong opinions, and they have what they believe to be facts to back up their opinions. And I wanted to hear it, and I wanted to promote it and have other people hear it. And then I'm having people respond to my first email, but not the second or third. I'm having people who will send me a message on Facebook and then change their mind and decide they can't come on the show. But these are people who don't seem to have a problem giving their opinions and information on Twitter, on their Facebook accounts. They're sharing and tweeting and retweeting, but they don't want to come on air and talk about anything. They don't want me to ask questions. Maybe is this because they don't want to be put on the spot? Or do people not want to talk to someone who is not on the same page as them just because my beliefs aren't where their beliefs are? Maybe they knew that. Maybe they thought this would be too difficult, or it would just be a time for them to feel like they are being stuck having a conversation with somebody who they have to persuade to feel the same way they feel. So here I am reaching out to all these different people on different platforms. And at one point, I thought I hit the jackpot because I reached out to more than one geologist here in the city in hopes that they would come on the show and be willing to talk about carbon capturing, which is something that Jess and I briefly discussed in one of our episodes, and I couldn't wait to expand on it with somebody who had tons of research and knowledge on it. But can you imagine my disappointment when not even an email back happened? Like, I mean, have you ever been on Twitter and you tweet something that you're sure is going to get a lot of feedback or comments or likes? You tag somebody in it and you can't wait to hear back, and then nothing, just dead air, not even a like. Especially when you're passionate about something, when you have high hopes, you have high expectations. And I guess maybe that was a lesson for myself to not get my hopes up and not assume that everything is going to run as smoothly as I think it's going to, because, well, that's life. Life doesn't always go the way you want it to. I wasn't doing this research and all this investigating for myself. I was doing this for you listeners. I was doing this to try and engage all of us. And I mean, how am I, or how are we supposed to learn both sides of the spectrum here and still be a moderate for myself personally if nobody is willing to have a conversation about this? Not on air, maybe amongst themselves, their little cliques where they all agree and they all have the same opinions. But how are we supposed to form our own opinions if we don't have an understanding? I mean, you have people like Katherine Hayhoe, who has no problems writing articles, writing papers, doing studies, talking on shows like TED, but you can't find her on a social media platform to try and engage with her one-on-one, personally, ask her questions. It's almost as if it's okay to throw her opinion out there, but not give anybody the opportunity to respond. And then you have people like Howard Bloom. He is more than willing to go on air, go on the mic, and say flat out how he feels. He's not worried about what kind of recoil there's going to be. He's not worried about other people's reactions. He will take it. He will listen to what people have to say. I mean, fuck, Howard Bloom, he's willing to engage with people. He's willing to educate. He wants to do that. And I just believe that these biochemists and these geologists that I reach out to, even some of the storm chasers and the meteorologists, were they scared to come on the show? Perhaps. Were they scared of backlash of speaking openly? Probably. Do you think that I haven't been scared about this? It's even tough to just reach out to somebody just to ask, because you have no idea how they're going to respond. But to be quite honest, I much prefer just being told no than people ghosting, because it's almost, again, in my opinion, that is just them being a coward, too cowardly to even say that they don't want to speak to a certain subject. And I think that it's more than them just being scared. I feel like maybe they just think, what's a good way to put this? That I am beneath them due to lack of knowledge, or due to not so much lack of knowledge, but just due to not being in the field that they are in. Like, I am somebody that they would have to entertain a conversation with. And why do that when they already have people who are on the same page as them, in the same field as them, that they can have conversations with? Why risk backlash? And that just brings me to whatever happened to freedom of opinion. That's what I'm expressing today. I know for sure there's going to be some people who are not happy with things that I have to say, but fuck it. And for people who don't have the balls to come on this show to express their opinions freely because of, oh, God forbid they say something that somebody out there doesn't like, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way. I think that's unfortunate for you. And I really wish that you guys as listeners could have been given more information. And with the nature of the mom mentality that I feel like this topic has, it's almost treated like a religion, I'd have to say. And it can be used as the next war. I mean, the protests that go on about this from opposing sides and the fights that happen, like, it's almost as if people would prefer to fight in the streets against each other about this instead of fight the environmental issues themselves. There's he said, she said games going on, and yet, like I said, nobody will come on air to discuss it and have a conversation about it. Like, not even willing to, despite the fact that they can protest probably for days. And what I've really come to notice, that it seems like whenever the government is involved in these things, everything gets shut right down. Everything becomes hush hush. So why is that? Why is there not more public information when it comes to this? So today I am doing this episode because I think it's important for me to express to you listeners the opinions that I have formed after a month of pretty in-depth research. And what I have learned with these two polar extremes is you can either A, conserve, so use less of something, reuse, recycle, all that sort of stuff. Take public transit, use recycle bins, use glass, use glass mugs instead of plastic bottles, carbon tax, reducing our carbon footprint, all of these things that restrict, in a sense, our lifestyle is a way to conserve. And when it comes down to the conserve theory, I can say that I disagree with the carbon tax. I feel as though it's a waste. I know I am not going to use any less gasoline if the price goes up. And I do, however, like the idea of using glass and metal mugs, as I spoke about earlier. To me, that sort of stuff makes sense. But then you have, on the polar opposite, the produce side. So with that, the industry is measuring up to meet our consumption needs. And so it's producing more in order to, quotations, fix our dilemmas. So produce more to have less problems. And so that's when you have stuff like using technology to make electric cars or coming up with technology for CO2 sequestration. And of course, there's mining and fossil fuels, but even something as simple as gardening. That is something, obviously, I can stand by. I mean, I spoke about that earlier. It's something I intend to pass down to my daughter, despite my not so green thumb. But then there are other things on the production side that maybe I'm not so okay with. Like in my research that I was doing, especially about mining, I'm not sure if you listeners have heard about mountaintop removal mining, but my goodness, some of the health effects that I came across when I was reading about that and watched a couple of videos on it was quite concerning to me. And so I guess that's kind of why I guess I can refer to myself as being a moderate. I pick from both sides. There are aspects of conservation that I like, and there's aspects with production that I can agree with. So I disagree and I agree. When it comes to conserving, despite the fact that I have been raised to recycle, I do prefer to just skip that whole process and use glass or metal. To me, that makes more sense. But then again, I don't agree that me as a tiny little speck on this map can alter, or reducing my carbon footprint is going to make a huge impact on the world. And maybe that is a mentality that people frown upon, because that mentality, I have heard people say, well, if everybody thinks that way, then there's not going to be any changes. But that is how I feel. I feel like I'm such a tiny speck on this world. Look at China. If you Google a picture of what Beijing looks like, check out their pollution. I mean, obviously, people there aren't caring too much, are they? Like, I would assume not. There's people that have to walk around wearing masks. Yet here I am being told and feeling like it is a necessity to reduce my carbon footprint, even though I am just this tiny little speck, or I feel like this tiny little speck. And what it really comes down to is, what do I feel the most comfortable with? What mindset and what changes am I okay with that I think matter? Because it is all about my expression of my opinion. And I know, if we want to go back to the gardening, that to me is something I'm okay with. That makes me feel comfortable. That is doable in my eyes. That is something that comes naturally to me. That doesn't give me any sort of hard feelings, whereas paying more for gas might suck, might be a pain in the ass with those fluctuating prices. But is the carbon tax really going to bring down fuel consumption? I know I don't drive my car any less. I don't think anybody I know does. And that's when it comes down to there being more electric cars produced. I would absolutely love to have an electric car. But unfortunately, it's unavailable for me. I can't currently afford an electric car, as a good solution as that may be, in my opinion. But the thing I believe is that we just have to pick realistic solutions. I need to pick realistic solutions that work for me, that work for my lifestyle, and not be expected to make these massive lifestyle changes that just don't make any sense. Like, for example, me switching from plastic bottles to my metal coffee mugs, my glass water jars, that makes sense. That is easy to do. And I'm not saying I'm going to be able to completely cut out using plastic bottles. There is obviously going to be times that I'm going to pick up a bottle of water from the store. But my point being is that at least I can recognize now, after what I've learned this month, that ultimately that is not benefiting the economy because of how much it costs to be recycling it. But again, that's not something that I can just change overnight. For me, being a moderate means being in the middle, remaining in the middle, but also being open to ideas from both ends of the spectrum. I personally refuse to be pulled to either side. I don't want to be an extremist on when it comes to conserving, and I don't want to be an extremist on the production side. I want to be able to practice ways from both ends, and I feel as though that's more practical and it's easier for so many people in society to do. I know it works for me, and I don't think that I need to be left or right. I think that for me, using my own common sense is what is important. I'm not going to unplug every electronic in my house every time I walk out that door, but I'm also not going to leave every light on. I'm going to do my best to leave everything off, except maybe my fridge. I don't want my food to go bad. And I'm not saying I'm going to have a farm in my backyard, but yeah, I would like to have a garden in my backyard. Am I still going to go to a grocery store? Yes, but I would prefer to shop locally. And I'm not going to use all natural cleaners all the time. I am going to use some that have toxic waste in them, but I'm still going to try and limit stuff like that, stuff that I find simple to do and an easy way to make a difference in my eyes without being an extremist. To me, that is what it means to be a moderate, to be in the middle, using my own common sense and without having to pick a side. So pretty much you catch my drift. You see where I'm coming from. I know there's probably so many people out there that disagree with me, but I really hope that there's some listeners that are like, hey, she has a point. Or maybe there are people who already feel the same way. That's what this podcast is all about. It's about freedom of expression. And this is me coming to you guys with my honest opinion and what I have come to conclude after this entire month of research. So if you would like to find the after show blog, go to www.lifeonlifestermspodcast.com. Find clips of previews of our show on our Twitter. Mine is Chelsey Kapler. I will always have posts up there for you guys to tune into. And you can also find us on Facebook at Life on Life's Terms Podcast. If you want, you can check me out on Instagram. It is Chelsey_Life on Life's Terms. And don't forget that we are also on YouTube, Life on Life's Terms. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll talk to y'all soon.